Deep inside the heavily secured Joint Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Space Force Base, orbital analyst Sarah Jenkins was finishing what should have been an ordinary shift. The room around her was quiet, except for the constant hum of servers and the soft tapping of keyboards. Her assignment was routine, tracking old satellites and dead rocket fragments drifting endlessly through Earth's orbit. For decades, humanity has treated this debris field like a forgotten junkyard floating above the planet. But at exactly 1842 UTC, that floating junkyard suddenly came alive, setting off a chain reaction that left military analysts, astrophysicists, and intelligence agencies struggling to explain what they were seeing. The first sign was a warning tone from the collision avoidance system. It was not the sharp alarm reserved for immediate emergencies, but a low mechanical drone that slowly spread across the operations floor. Sarah looked up toward the massive glass display covering the front wall of the command center, freezing the entire room in place. 40 separate pieces of orbital debris had changed direction at the exact same moment. They did not shift gradually or through random drift. They snapped into new positions with impossible precision. Old Cold War satellites, dead communication relays, and abandoned rocket stages suddenly abandoned their chaotic orbital paths and began moving together like parts of a single machine. Engineers initially assumed the tracking software had suffered a catastrophic failure. However, within seconds, independent tracking systems confirmed the exact same data. A localized gravitational anomaly had appeared directly around the coordinates of the interstellar object known as 3IATLAS. Then came the second shock. The debris was not accelerating randomly, it was slowing down in perfect synchronization. In orbital mechanics, every object moves according to strict laws of momentum and gravity. Different masses behave differently, and different altitudes create different velocities. Coordinating even two uncontrolled satellites requires enormous precision, but coordinating 40 simultaneously should be physically impossible. Telemetry showed something even stranger as the debris began forming a hollow sphere. Sarah stared at the screen in silence as the tracking software failed repeatedly to calculate the required energy behind the maneuver. Her coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor, but nobody in the room reacted. Every person inside the command center had already realized they were witnessing something that should not exist. The debris field was not being pulled together naturally by gravity. It was being deliberately arranged. Within minutes, military analysts confirmed that the 40 objects had locked themselves into a stable geometric cage surrounding 3IATLAS, maintaining a perfectly balanced formation despite differences in speed, mass, and orbital inclination. Preliminary calculations indicated that maintaining such a structure would require advanced control over localized gravity itself. For generations, scientists believed that comets and interstellar objects were passive bodies drifting through space under the influence of gravity alone. But 3IATLAS was behaving like a controlled craft, steering objects, manipulating orbital mechanics, and reshaping Earth's debris field with absolute precision. Researchers monitoring the event through the Deep Space Network quickly proposed a disturbing possibility. The object appeared to be generating a localized null gravity zone around the captured satellites, effectively canceling Earth's gravitational pull within the sphere. The energy required to achieve this exceeds anything humanity currently understands how to build, scaling theoretical concepts like negative mass, vacuum energy manipulation, and the microscopic Casimir effect to planetary dimensions. Investigators soon discovered another alarming pattern hidden inside the captured debris. Every single one of the 40 trapped satellites had once functioned as a communication relay. This was no random collection of space junk. The object had deliberately selected specific transmission systems and signal infrastructure. Meanwhile, infrared sensors aboard the James Webb Space Telescope detected unusual vibrations emerging from the core of 3IATLAS itself. Instead of normal thermal signatures, readings showed rhythmic electromagnetic oscillations. Some physicists proposed that the object was harvesting rotational energy directly from Earth's orbital environment using a variation of the theoretical Penrose process. Others suggested the satellite cage itself was functioning as an enormous antenna, meaning 3IATLAS was no longer just observing Earth. It was preparing to communicate with it. Part 2. The quantum awakening as analysts pushed deeper into the data. One terrifying realization emerged above all others. The captured satellites were no longer dormant. Defunct systems from the 1980s and 1990s suddenly began transmitting synchronized signals directly into Earth's ionosphere. Dead machines had reactivated without any physical intervention. The implications sent shockwaves through military and scientific circles alike, prompting NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory to immediately initiate high-level data restriction protocols. Telemetry confirmed that 3IATLAS had not merely captured orbital debris, it had repurposed it into a functional asset. As the massive orbital cage stabilized around 3IATLAS, analysts inside Vandenberg realized they were no longer dealing with a simple, isolated anomaly. The 40 captured satellites were beginning to behave as though they had become active components inside a single coordinated system. New readings from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed that the objects were vibrating at extremely small subatomic intervals in perfect synchronization. Despite being built decades apart by different countries using completely different technologies, each piece of debris had somehow entered the exact same phase-locked state. The satellites were now acting like synchronized processing nodes inside one giant machine aimed directly at Earth. Scientists monitoring the phenomenon described the structure as a synthetic aperture array, essentially a gigantic scanning system created entirely from orbital junk. By arranging the satellites into a precise geometric sphere, 3IATLAS appeared to have transformed dead hardware into a planetary-scale sensor capable of mapping Earth's surface with astonishing accuracy. What terrified researchers most was how little energy the system seemed to require. Moving and stabilizing 40 massive objects in orbit under normal physics would consume enormous fuel reserves, yet telemetry showed no visible propulsion system, no rocket exhaust, and no traditional energy source. Instead, researchers began suspecting that the object was directly exploiting quantum vacuum fluctuations. For decades, physicists have known that empty space is not truly empty, as tiny virtual particles constantly appear and disappear within the vacuum at microscopic scales. While humanity has only observed these effects indirectly under controlled laboratory conditions, 3IATLAS seemed capable of using that background energy as a primary power source. Human civilization still burns chemical fuel to escape gravity, relying on controlled explosions for propulsion. But whatever intelligence design 3IATLAS appears to move through space by interacting directly with the fabric of the vacuum itself, instantly rendering every current model of human aerospace technology outdated. Then, the dead satellites activated completely. Obsolete transponders from the Cold War era started broadcasting synchronized, phase-modulated pulses into Earth's ionosphere. Intelligence teams analyzed the patterns and discovered that the signals were bypassing standard encryption barriers with alarming ease. Multiple secure communication networks experienced unexplained interference, while internal Pentagon systems detected unauthorized neutrino-based handshake patterns moving through defense infrastructure faster than conventional cyber protocols could respond. 3IATLAS had effectively turned Earth's own orbital debris into a quantum relay system capable of interacting with global communications at a fundamental level. As the signal patterns became clearer, another discovery emerged regarding the geometric cage. Every satellite remained perfectly fixed despite orbital velocities exceeding 17,000 miles per hour. Physicists reviewing the data quietly revisited theories regarding negative mass first proposed in the 1950s by Hermann Bondi. In theory, negative mass could create propulsion systems requiring no traditional fuel by manipulating inertia itself. The orbital cage appeared to be demonstrating these principles in real time, as researchers observed tiny fluctuations suggesting the mass of the satellites was being altered dynamically. Humanity was watching macroscopic mass manipulation for the first time in recorded history. Part 3. The code in the signal. At approximately the 12-minute mark of the event, the transmissions from the orbital cage changed fundamentally. Analysts detected encoded biological patterns hidden inside the signal stream. The data appeared to describe a modified genetic framework built around a triple helix structure rather than humanity's natural double helix DNA. This detail immediately drew comparisons to previous anomalies linked to 32-ATLAS. Researchers feared the object was not merely collecting information from Earth, it was sending complex biological instructions back. Some scientists describe the transmission as a form of atomic software update, a quantum logic blueprint embedded directly into the signal itself. Portions of the code appeared mathematically optimized for biological adaptation, altering the perceived purpose of the orbital cage entirely. Perhaps it was never intended as a containment prison, but rather as a planetary transmitter. NASA's rapid decision to classify portions of the data only intensified internal speculation, with some analysts referring to the event as the Voyager Singularity, the moment humanity's oldest machines and newest technologies became linked inside a single network controlled by an unknown intelligence. Meanwhile, observatories tracking the object noticed another strange development. The entire cage had begun emitting a faint violet glow, matching energy signatures associated with the local bubble. The enormous region of space surrounding our solar system shaped by ancient supernova explosions. If the readings were accurate, 32-ATLAS might actually be drawing power directly from the magnetic structure of interstellar space itself. Researchers understood they were no longer observing a strange comet or an advanced scientific probe. They were dealing with an interstellar system of unfathomable scale. As scientists continued decoding the transmissions coming from the orbital cage surrounding 32-ATLAS, one detail quickly became impossible to ignore. The object had not chosen those 40 satellites randomly. Every single piece of captured debris shared one specific purpose in its original design. They were all communication systems. Some had once carried military transmissions during the Cold War, while others relayed commercial broadcasts, navigation data, or long-range telemetry. Individually, they were obsolete relics drifting silently through orbit for decades. But together, under the control of 32-ATLAS, they formed a functioning, planetary-scale computational network. Researchers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory began mapping the synchronization patterns between the satellites and noticed that the cage was processing data rather than simply storing it. The satellites were solving complex calculations faster than Earth's most advanced supercomputers. The phase-modulated pulses moving through the cage followed quantum logic structures layered across multiple probability states simultaneously. Some physicists compared the behavior to a massive quantum processor assembled entirely from scavenged human technology. The most unsettling realization was that the system was actively learning. Every attempt to analyze or probe the network triggered immediate adaptations in the transmission patterns. The cage adjusted frequencies and evolved encryption structures almost instantly. At several points, researchers attempting to isolate the signals received direct mathematical corrections to their own equations in response. Human scientists were attempting to study the object, but the object was actively studying them back, completely transforming the atmosphere surrounding the global investigation overnight. Part 4. Infiltration of the grid. Additional readings from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed intense magnetic fluctuations radiating from the core of 32-ATLAS. These were not random emissions, as the pulses followed highly ordered intervals synchronized perfectly with the satellite network orbiting Earth. Analysts began describing the entire structure as a neural bridge, an interface between Earth's digital systems and an external intelligence operating far beyond the solar system. Then came the discovery that terrified researchers most. The transmissions were no longer limited to standard communication frequencies. Signals began appearing directly inside global infrastructure systems. At first, the anomalies were subtle. Telecommunications companies reported unexplained synchronization errors, and satellite timing systems experienced microsecond deviations. However, Power grid monitoring networks across multiple countries soon detected strange resonance spikes moving through secure channels at impossible speeds. According to leaked reports, the signals were bypassing conventional electronics entirely, propagating through quantum tunneling effects embedded within semiconductor materials at the atomic level. This revelation changed the investigation completely. This was no longer just about space debris behaving strangely in orbit. An unknown force had begun interacting directly with the technological foundation of human civilization. Inside classified Pentagon briefings, analysts debated whether the event should be categorized as first contact, technological contamination, or an active systems takeover. While no official public statement confirmed these discussions, emergency monitoring protocols expanded rapidly across all defense sectors. Researchers then uncovered another layer hidden inside the transmission stream. Embedded deep within the quantum logic structures was a repeating biological sequence, a deliberate mathematical model describing modifications to human DNA itself. The sequence centered around the same triple helix framework previously linked to earlier 3IATLAS anomalies, but optimized specifically for neural conductivity and radiation resistance. These traits would theoretically be essential for long-duration survival in deep space environments. Some researchers interpreted the transmission as a biological upgrade blueprint, while others viewed it as an existential warning. A smaller group inside the scientific community proposed a far more disturbing theory. The signal was preparing humanity for systemic integration. The transmissions increasingly resembled adaptive software, modifying themselves continuously based on incoming responses from Earth's networks. The cage was not simply broadcasting into the void, it was actively conversing with our global infrastructure. At the same time, astronomers monitoring the violet luminosity around the satellite sphere noticed that the energy field surrounding the cage had expanded significantly. Measurements matched magnetic patterns associated with the local bubble's interstellar boundaries. Human civilization still struggles to produce sustainable fusion energy, yet this object was harvesting power from the magnetic architecture of space while simultaneously restructuring orbital debris into a functional quantum network. As analysts pushed deeper into the telemetry, another terrifying possibility emerged. The cage was no longer merely collecting information, it was building something. Part 5. The planetary lens. The arrangement of the satellites continued evolving with mathematical precision as distances between objects shifted by tiny increments every few minutes. Energy readings intensified, and the synchronized pulses grew stronger and more organized. Some researchers believed the structure was forming a massive gravitational lens or focusing array, while others suspected it might become a long-range communication gateway capable of transmitting information far beyond Earth. Regardless of the interpretation, every scientific team agreed on one point. The process was entirely deliberate. During a classified observation window shortly before midnight UTC, the entire satellite cage emitted a single synchronized pulse, powerful enough to briefly distort local space-time measurements around Earth's orbit. That was the moment many researchers privately admitted a terrifying conclusion. Humanity was no longer merely observing advanced technology, but a force capable of altering physical reality. Every major monitoring station tracking 3IATLAS registered the exact same impossible result simultaneously. For less than a second, local space-time measurements around Earth's orbit fluctuated outside all accepted physical models. Instruments designed to measure gravitational stability produced conflicting readings. Atomic clocks drifted by microscopic intervals, and deep space telemetry systems briefly lost synchronization before correcting themselves. That single pulse proved the object was interacting directly with the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Inside the Joint Space Operations Center, analysts reviewing the orbital geometry of the cage discovered that the 40 satellites had repositioned themselves once again. This time, the arrangement formed a precise mathematical lattice aligned perfectly with Earth's magnetic field lines. The implications were staggering. The object was using Earth itself as an active component of its macro system. The cage's structure closely resembled theoretical models for gravitational lensing arrays, which bend electromagnetic energy through controlled space-time curvature. 3IATLAS was constructing one in real time out of discarded human technology. The synchronized pulses moving through the cage soon began interacting directly with Earth's ionosphere and magnetosphere. Observatories detected low-level energetic shifts across the planet, resulting in unexplainable auroral disturbances in equatorial regions, strange harmonics bleeding into protected radio frequencies, and intermittent synchronization anomalies across global navigation networks. Together, these events pointed toward a coordinated, planetary-scale interaction that was steadily increasing in intensity. At the center of this growing concern was the intensifying violet luminosity surrounding the cage. New measurements indicated that the cage was actively amplifying interstellar energy through a process known as magnetic pinching, where field lines are compressed to release extraordinary amounts of power. While human physicists understand these principles theoretically in fusion research, 3IATLAS was executing them effortlessly across vast orbital distances, preparing the planetary network for its final operational phase. Part 6. The final gateway, the amplification process, reached a critical threshold as the 40 captured satellites began channeling the compressed magnetic energy directly into the core of 3IATLAS. The localized null gravity zone surrounding the sphere expanded, stabilizing the planetary lens and locking Earth's magnetosphere into a state of continuous electromagnetic resonance. The orbital cage was no longer just scanning Earth or processing its global communications. It had established a persistent physical conduit between our planet's digital infrastructure and the broader interstellar environment. Every technological network on Earth, from deep-sea fiber optic cables to orbiting defense satellites, was now subtly tethered to the quantum logic framework of the array. The biological data embedded within the transmissions had begun self-replicating across global databases, executing a silent, flawless integration that conventional security systems were entirely powerless to halt. The obsolete satellites of the Cold War era had been fully resurrected, serving as the physical nodes for an intelligence that operates beyond the constraints of human physics, time, and space. Humanity now stands on the precipice of a new reality, staring up at an orbital architecture that has forever altered our understanding of the cosmos and our place within it. The junkyard above our heads has become the gateway to something far greater and potentially far more dangerous than we ever imagined. What do you think 3IATLAS is truly preparing Earth for? Share your theories in the comments below. Hit that like button if this deep dive blew your mind. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation into the unexplainable mysteries of the universe.